Hello guys and welcome back to Planet 40k. We're going to be talking about Necron Detachment strategies in this very video. Now before getting into the video, as always, make sure you're liking, make sure you're subscribing, sharing, all that jazz before we start these videos off. Right, so Necron Detachments. We have got 6 detachments because we've got the newest one at the December time, Shatter Arsenal, so there's 6, although 5 of them are in the codex, and you'll see the one on a PDF file available from the Warhammer community webpage on the download section. So we've got 6 in total. We're going to go through each of these. I'm going to tell you about my tips, I'm going to tell you about my playstyles, maybe general strategies and general strength. So let's start this thing off. We're going to start with the Awakened Dynasty. So of course the Awakened Dynasty has got the detachment role command protocol. So if you have a character that is leading a unit, the entire unit gets a +1 to the hit roll. Nice and simple, nice and straightforward. Now it's mainly centered around characters, of course, that can lead units, hence the command protocol's ability. It's quite a well balanced detachment. We've got a very strong variety of different stratagems that relate to different types of units, whether they're shooter units, whether they're melee units, whether they're durable units. There's a good range, which is what I quite like about it. So if you're going to be using these stratagems, you're going to want CP, and of course you get CP every turn. In fact, you get 2 every turn, but ideally you want more. So Imhotep the Stormlord may be an optional character within this detachment, just to give you a little extra CP every battle round. And this is the detachment which I would call the all-rounder, and it's an ideal starter detachment, in fact, although even though I'm not a new player, I actually tend to use this detachment the most, because I just find it the most, not only the most fun, but also I find it quite competitive as well. And again, the flexibility, the versatility, you can literally use anything really, and it will do okay. But going back to those leaders for a moment, for the command protocol's ability, we've got a whole host of characters within our codex, which gives us a really good opportunity to actually gain the ability. You've got Scorpec Lords, Overlords, all the Crypteks like the Technomancers, the Locust Lords, Royal Wardens, the Oracle and the Diviner, Chronomancers, you name it. We've got loads. We've got literally loads of them. You've got plenty of options to go with. Now, most of these leaders will go with the battle line units, so your Necron Warriors, your Necron Immortals, but don't forget the Technomancer can be leading those Canoptek Wraiths, which are quite important in this detachment in my opinion, because they're a super durable unit. We've also got a bit of synergy with Illuminazares. I always get that word wrong, but whatever his blimmin' name is, Illuminazares is what I call him. He likes to hang around those battle line units in particular to gain a bit of extra AP for those units and defensively as well. And he's an infantry character, which we'll probably touch upon in a moment when we talk about stratagems. Even units that don't synergize that strongly with this detachment, like a Hex Smart Destroyer or a Command Barge, because they don't lead naturally, they can also be super useful as well, because there's some good enhancements, like a +1 to hit aura enhancement that you could put on either of those, so they're effectively leading without actually leading. What else I like about the Awakened Dynasty is the reanimation protocol's power. There's quite a lot of shenanigans you can do in terms of reanimation. Aside from the standard reanimation in the command phase, you've got other tricks within your list. Like for example, you're going to be carrying Resurrection Orbs with these characters as a starting point. With the Overlords and the Locust Lord, they've got Resurrection Orbs. You've got the Protocol of Undying Legions, so as soon as you lose a model within a unit, you can pop D3 +1 back, as long as that unit's being led. You can add an extra Reanimator in there as well for another D3 on top of that. You can start to really I've been caught out before for saying that word stack. I don't literally mean stack, but if you have a Reanimator and I say a Technomancer, you can do a lot of different healing abilities and reanimation abilities onto the same unit, which brings a lot of wounds back. And you can even revive an infantry character, which is really cool, with the Protocol of Eternal Revenant, and that does include Illuminazares, because he is an infantry character. Now there's some decent enhancements within this detachment. A Veil of Darkness is pretty impressive, one of my favourites, because you can teleport at the end of your opponent's turn, and then deep strike in anywhere on the battlefield. Quite useful for Locust Destroyers in particular, because you can get a lot of your Gorse cannons off. You've got a 4+ Feel No Pain save enhancement, which is pretty good on a Scorpec Lord, or again that Command Barge. Would find that quite useful. That's quite a durable vehicle, -1 to wound it if the strength is higher. You've got the invuln save of a 4+, and then the 4+ will no pain save as well. That's pretty good. The Netherrealm Casket, giving stealth is okay. I mean, you could do something similar with a Chronomancer's natural ability, but if you've used a different cryptic like a Plasmancer, you've still got the opportunity to gain stealth as well as having the 5+ critical hit rolls and stuff. Technomancer as well, in fact, with the Wraiths, Canoptek Wraiths. And then of course you've got the option of the Cryptothralls with them Cryptex to make them even more durable, which is kind of cool. Then there's the last enhancement, which is the Phasal Subjugator, which are basically, it's expensive, it's 35 points, but allows units that are within 6 inches of that character to have the effects of being led. So it's a +1 to hit. So that's going to work very nicely on units that can't be led, like Doomsday Arcs, Tomb Blades, Monoliths, Canoptek Spiders, virtually every other unit except for character units. It doesn't work on characters, but Tesseract Bolts could work, for example. So they could gain a +1 to hit without actually being led. To summarise the Awakened Dynasty, it's basically centred around leaders. Pick your best leaders. There's lots of different synergies. If you've not seen one of my recent videos about the top combos, check that one out. There's a few good ones in there. For example, 20 Necron Warriors with Oracle the Diviner and a Royal Warden as a piece of synergy. 4+ invulnerable save for the entire unit and a fall back and shoot option. Cool. Very cool. But now in the Awakened Dynasty, +1 to hit as well. Nice. The second detachment within our codex is the Annihilation Legion. So this is where Destroyer Cult units and Flayed ones get to reroll their charge roll. And if the target is below half strength, it's a +1 to the charge roll. Don't care so much about that part, I just like the reroll on its own. And then each time a Destroyer Cult unit makes a range attack that targets the closest eligible unit, add 1 to the armor penetration. That's really useful for Locust Destroyers because they've already got an ability where they get to reroll 1s against the closest eligible unit. So rerolling 1s and an extra bit of AP at the same time. But yeah, this is mainly centered around the Destroyer Cult units and Flayed ones as well. The detachment feels slightly lopsided towards the more melee based units. I mean, we do have a few shooty stuff. We do have Locust Destroyers, Locust Heavies and a Hexmark as well, I suppose. But they don't gain as many buffs and bonuses and stratagems as the melee stuff does. So the main cornerstone for this detachment would be Scorpet Destroyers. If you're not running 3 units of 6 with Scorpet Lords, then you're probably doing this detachment wrong. That should be the bread and butter of this detachment and of your list. Now these guys are pretty mean, they've got decent movement, lots of attacks, lots of abilities when they're within engagement range to cause mortal wounds on the charge, lethal hits with rerolls to the hit rolls, devastating wounds if you burn a plasma sight and you get 2 of them per unit with a full unit. You could also use the Pitiless Hunter stratagem for the 6-inch pile-ins and consolidation moves. These guys are your heavy hitting crew. Now each unit totals 270 points, including the Lord as well, which isn't too bad, and I'd in fact consider adding an attachment as well. There's 2 that I like within this detachment. One is the Soulless Reaper. On a 3+ roll, enemy units can't fall back, so they're forced to stay in that fight phase in their own turn, which means your opponent can't shoot your Scorpet Destroyers. And then when the fight phase comes around, you're likely going to be fighting first because you're a defender, and your opponent didn't even want to fight to begin with. So that's a really useful one on a 3+. The other one is the Eldritch Nightmare, forcing Battle Shock Test to units within engagement range at the start of a fight phase. That can swing things, secondary objectives potentially. Sometimes the mission rules happen at the end of a turn, or turn 5 in fact, when it's at the end of the game. So that can swing things here and there. And also if your opponent is battle shocked, then they can't use stratagems on their unit. Now the second part to your Annihilation list is going to involve Locust Destroyers. Now they've already got the bonuses if you shoot the closest eligible unit. We know that, we've already said that. That's going to go to -3 AP from -2 AP. Well, kind of cool really, because if you're shooting at standard intercessor level, they're now on a 6+. Obviously there's like cover and things. You probably want to add a Locust Lord to get the 5+ critical hits on your lethal hits. And also you get the Resurrection Orb, which is also something that a few people do forget that the Locust Lord actually has, is the Resurrection Orb on a D6 as well. Now getting full rerolls to hit is handy, because if you're firing on objectives and they're the closest, you're rerolling everything, so you would fish for those 5+ lethal hits. Even if it's a 3, roll it again, try go for the 5, because then you don't need to roll to wound, because you've got a lethal hit. And then you've got the Spore of Frailty stratagem. So you're using this after you've used your Locust Destroyers, after you've reduced your opponent's unit, they're not at starting strength. What you then do is use that Spore of Frailty stratagem, let's call it Destroyers or whatever, they're going to then gain a +1 to hit. Now you can also gain a +1 to wound as well, if the unit is below, I think it's half strength, isn't it? Because sometimes it's okay on the bigger stuff, but the smaller stuff, I don't think it's that needed. Now part 3 of your list, you're going to need some anti-tank destroyers. You don't necessarily need a Lord of Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Gorse Destructors because the strength is 14 and you're re-rolling 1s to wound against the correct targets, which are monsters and vehicles. So I don't think you need the criticals for the lethal hits to avoid the wound roll. So I think you'll just wound. You're probably 3s re-rolling 1s. These weapons are damage 6, which are very tidy against those monsters and vehicles. I'd have a lot of these guys within my list playing the Annihilation Legion. Now the extra AP you can get for the closest eligible unit, I mean you're -4 AP anyway, you don't necessarily need it really. So I wouldn't bother too much. Plus you're going for your prime targets, you're going for the big stuff. If there's a little unit that's sort of nearby, you're not going to shoot them first with Locust Heavies anyway. Now the 4th part of your list is, well, you're going to need scoring units. If you've not got any scoring units, how are you going to score secondaries? So you're going to need units with the right keywords, in particular like Ophidian Destroyers. They've got Deep Strike and they can come back off and then re-enter the battlefield because of their Tunneling Horrors. Very useful, especially in this detachment. They're also decent in melee too, and of course there's a lot of stratagems and buffs to charge rolls and stuff that they're going to get affected by if you wanted to use them to fight. Flayed ones with Infiltration or Infiltrators is very useful, and that synergizes with the detachment rolls too because they're flayed ones. I mean, I prefer them doing actions, so I don't really want them in a fight, in honesty. I'll just infiltrate them at the start of the battle, hope for a card that relates to something in the start of the battle, like Area Denial, maybe it's Secure No Man's Land, something like that, just to get some points on the board. If they die then, they die, it's okay. I mean, I like the old days where you can bring flayed ones in groups of 20, because then you really did use them to fight. You just threw them up the battlefield. 10 doesn't quite feel that durable, even though they have got stealth. So I would just go with 5 and infiltrate them. Then there's the Hexmark Destroyers as well, which we did mention earlier. Deep Strike, Lone Op, that combination is very OP. I love them. I would definitely take them in the Annihilation Legion. On to the 3rd detachment, we've got the Canoptek Core. Core is all about the power matrix. It's all about gaining board control. Have the power matrix already unlocked in your home deployment zone. That's already yours. And you need to gain at least half the objectives in the no man's land to gain power matrix for the no man's land. And the same applies with the enemy deployment zone as well. Now Cryptek units and Canoptek units are always hitting or re-rolling hit rolls over 1. If you're within the power matrix, you get to re-roll all the hit rolls instead, which is very useful, very aggressive in fact, especially with all your Canoptek units in particular, because they're pretty beefy. So yeah, you're mainly using Canoptek units, you're mainly using Crypteks to turn those battle line units into Cryptek units, so therefore they gain the buffs as well. Your Immortals, your Warriors, they're going to be the main benefiters from having a Cryptek within the unit, because again, they become a Cryptek unit, so all of a sudden your Immortals could be re-rolling 1s to hit, and they naturally re-roll 1s to wound, so they kind of re-roll everything if you get the right combo together. If you're within your power matrix, you can be re-rolling all your hit rolls, and if you're firing on objectives, you're re-rolling all your wound rolls. So Immortals that are led by a Cryptek can be very powerful in the Canoptek Core. The main goal for me though within this detachment is getting hold of the no man's land and doing what a lot of people call Canoptek Wraith Jail. It's where you get your 2 or 3 units, I go with 3 units of Canoptek Wraiths, you throw them into the no man's land objectives and you just bunker down. You just sit tight. I mean, those Wraiths led by a Technomancer, of course, 4 wounds apiece, toughness 6, 4+ invulnerable save, 5+ for no pain save. Obviously you've got your reanimation protocols naturally, the Technomancer can heal D3 as well for a model. It's a very durable unit. They've also got a 10-inch movement, so you can get there quite quickly. They're causing mortal wounds when they jump over enemy units. They do a lot, and yeah, if you can get them onto no man's land objectives with their OC, you're likely holding it, and it likely means you're going to be re-rolling all your hit rolls for those Wraiths with the Vicious Claws, rather than just the 1s. That's really important to keep the aggression going within the no man's land. You could actually give the Technomancer the Dimensional Sanctum enhancement to give one of the units infiltrators. so you can get straight onto those objectives before you even move. You're there already. And it also acts as an anti-infiltrate unit, which is also very useful, very tactical in the deployment stage of the game. If you actually use infiltrators on a Wraith unit, you could even be bashing down the enemy deployment zone power matrix turn 1 if you really wanted to, because you'll be 9 inches away from the enemy DZ, and these things move 10. So you can already get yourself in, and depending on where the objective is, of course, maybe make a charge or whatever. Another main unit within this detachment is the Doomstalkers. Ideally you want 3 if you're using Doomstalkers. They provide the anti-elite or anti-tank weaponry. They're hitting on 4s, but they do have heavy, so it will likely be 3s, and you're likely re-rolling everything because they're probably back within your home DZ, which means they're in the power matrix re-rolling all the hit rolls. So 3s re-rolling everything, providing that you've got line of sight, of course, is decent. They've got a 48-inch range as well, so they don't need to be close. They don't need to go into the no man's land if you don't want them to. You do have a reaction move stratagem, which is the reactive subroutines to move 6 inches if an enemy unit gets too close, make your opponent completely screw up their charge move. Or you've got the counter-temporal shift, which means they can only be shot within 18-inch range. So the big guns at the back, the 48-inch range weapons, the 72-inch range weapons, they cannot physically see if they're not within 18. Of course, if you've got 3 Doomstalkers next to each other, then they'll just select another one. So make sure you've hidden them somewhat. Otherwise, that stratagem kind of isn't going to work. Crypteks, of course, are a big part of this list. We already briefly mentioned the battle line units, but we didn't mention the Crypteks themselves. There's quite a few here. We've got Orokin the Diviner, ideally with warriors, giving them all an invuln save. You've got Plasmancers. I like to put them with Immortals because they've got the better weapons. It's the more aggressive Cryptek. Technomancer, obviously with the Wraiths, but you could go with the warriors for the feel no pain save potentially. And Chronomancers with Immortals with the Tesla I like in particular. You can move, advance, shoot, and then move. All with Tesla. If one of these Crypteks dies, you've got Curse of the Cryptek as a stratagem for 1 CP. So whoever kills your Cryptek, let's say some Hellblasters killed your Plasmancer for whatever reason, you pop this stratagem. Now all of a sudden, army-wide for the rest of the game, all Canoptek units get a +1 to hit and a +1 to wound against those Hellblasters. Whoever murdered your Cryptek, which I think is quite a nice stratagem, quite reactive, and I do quite like that one. Definitely catches a lot of people out. You can also unlock Solar Pulse, which unlocks ignoring cover when you're firing onto an objective, that is. That could be ideal for your Immortals maybe, because you're potentially, again, re-rolling all the hit rolls, all the wound rolls against enemies that are on objectives, then taking away cover on top. Useful. Especially with the Gorse, in fact, because that's a minus 1 AP? Yeah, minus 1 AP on that. You can add Cryptos rolls as well for added durability, we always mention that. And in fact, Illuminazares makes his return in this detachment because he is actually a Cryptek with Lone Op. So that means he's going to have his own rerolls within the power matrix. Now, one last set of units that I wanted to mention within the Canoptek Court that doesn't get mentioned enough is the Catan, particularly the Nightbringer. Now, Catan are slow moving, they plod along 6 inches, and that's kind of their downfall. But once they're there, they pack a punch. They're super durable, and they literally slap whatever is there, right? Now, in the Canoptek Court, you want to be aggressive in the no man's land, which actually isn't that far away from your deployment zone. So you don't need to go too far. You don't need to go to the enemy deployment zone. Unless you really want to, you don't need to. You will win the game just by holding the no man's land and your home objective. Now this Catan, this Nightbringer, can just slowly float towards a no man's land, get onto an objective. Even if you had to advance turn 1, just get there. That's a solid, durable unit in a key position, because your opponent now has to make a decision. Do I go and take that objective, which means I've got to go fight a Nightbringer, or do I let us have it? And if they let you have it, okay, the Nightbringer isn't going to be doing much, but that's one objective, that's your primary scoring, that's your power matrix, half done potentially, and then you throw all the Wraiths into the other way, and your opponent has to now make another decision. What am I going to do now? There's 12 or 18 Wraiths on that side, there's a Nightbringer on that side, got to do something. It's a very aggressive detachment, and Catan do work for that very reason. I mean, you could even throw a case for the Deceiver as well, because it's got stealth, and it's got OC6. It's the only Catan that has OC6, not 4, and stealth is quite useful. Okay, on to the next one, which is the Obeisance Phalanx. Now this one has worthy foes as its detachment rule. So in your command phase, you're selecting one enemy unit, and then until the start of your next command phase, nobles, lich guard, and trite units all gain a +1 to wound against that selected target. It's only one target, unfortunately, and it can't be changed. There's no stratagem to change that, which is, I think there should have been a stratagem to change it, because other detachments have ways of changing targets or gaining extra targets. We don't have that. So this is of course mainly built around your Lich Guard and your Triot units, and of course Noble as well. There's also going to be synergy with the Silent King because it's got the Triot keyword. We'll mention him momentarily because there's a big part to play within this detachment. But with the Nobles, you're going to want to dive into the Overlords and maybe imitate the Stormlord. Sadly, a Command Barge and a Royal Warden do not qualify as Nobles. They don't have the keyword, so they are going to be left out in this detachment. Also, bear in mind, adding a Noble to a battle line unit gives that battle line unit the Noble keyword. Very similar to the Canoptek Court when you add a Cryptek to a battle line unit. So the entire unit that has a Noble will be Noble. So therefore, let's say there's an Overlord attached to your Immortals. The Immortals could use the Worthy Foes detachment rule for the +1 to wound against a selected target, and so on. Now, some great combinations in this detachment, such as an Overlord with the Translocation Shroud, leading Tesla Immortals that have Assault so they can advance the full 6 because of the Shroud, so they're auto-advancing. Add the Chronomancer in the mix for the extra movement afterwards, and then there's a -1 to hit the unit because of the Chronomancer. And you don't even need a Plasmancer either, because there is the Enslaved Artifice stratagem, which will also be free to use with My Will Be Done because of the Overlord. And that is going to unlock criticals on a 5+, which is basically Plasmancer's main use. Other combos would be a Noble with some Lich Guard, because the Lich Guard can apply their -1 to wound when being led by a Noble with their Guardian Protocols ability. The Overlords carry the Resurrection Orb, so they're going to be nice for the Lich Guard as well, to be healing them back. And again, free stratagem use with Mine Will Be Done. Now ideally with Lich Guard, you're going to want the Swords and Shields. That's the best option right now. And for most of the, well, for all of this edition and most of the last edition, Swords and Shields was the way to go. I mean, it's arguable that Wraiths, Canoptek Wraiths are just better here, because they've kind of got the durability, they've got the damage too, and the invuln saves. I've always preferred Wraiths anyway, but in this detachment, of course, you're looking at Lich Guard because of the Worthy Foes ability. Now, there's a couple of really useful enhancements that you can stick on a Noble when leading whatever unit you want. So, for example, Warrior Noble, a -1 to hit the unit. That could be really cool for Lich Guard because it's a -1 to wound them if the strength is greater than toughness 5. So it could be a -1 to hit them, and then a -1 to wound them. Not bad at all. Eternal Conqueror is another one where you're re-rolling hits versus enemy units on objectives. Again, very nice with maybe Immortals, because they're going to be re-rolling all the hit rolls on enemy units on objectives, and then re-rolling all the wound rolls with enemy units on objectives. So a nice bit of synergy there. Now the Silent King commonly features in the Obeisance Phalanx detachment, as he's got the Triarch keyword. Now you're going to be using him for his Triarchal abilities, so you can be re-rolling hit rolls and wound rolls over 1 for units within 6. You can be using a re-rollable charge and a +1 to strength for units within 6, or just ignoring all modifiers for units within 6. I prefer the re-rolls of 1s to hit and wound. A lot of people swear on their Grand's Grave that the ignoring modifiers is the better option. I think it depends on the faction you're going up against. There's a lot of different modifiers that certain factions can do, but other detachments don't really do them. So the re-rolls of 1s to hit and wound comes in clutch. He's also great for that -1 to damage stratagem, which is the Nano Assembly Protocols. It's super handy because those Triarchal Minears are only 5 wounds apiece, and they're going to eat a lot of the damage before the damage even gets to the Silent King. So if you can -1 to damage as well on top of that, that's great. That's really good. Now Triarch Praetorians, they've got the Triarch keyword of course, they've got Deep Strike, they can shoot and fight, re-roll charges, fall back and charge. They've got a use in this detachment. Maybe like bringing 10 of them alongside the Silent King could be a thing. So they've got the re-rolls of 1s to hit and wound potentially, or they're not going to need the re-rollable charge roll though, so maybe I'll not bother with that. There's some extra stratagems for Triarch units as well as Lich Guard units to be able to fight on death, able to gain OC, and to gain precision in melee, which can be useful again against certain factions. If you come up against like Orcs, a lot of these little Orc mobs have leaders within them, Pain Boys and Mech Boy, I can't remember the name of these little Orc leaders, but having precision can get rid of them and then get rid of the bonuses for that unit very useful. Now something else, one funny thing to add here. With the OC stratagem, the stratagem that gives you extra OC, 3 OC if you're a vehicle model, and I said that very clearly, vehicle model, means if you use this on the Silent King and you've got the 2 Triacle Menhirs up and running, you're adding 9 OC. It's called Territorial Obsession, so check that one out. Do it on the Silent King. It's going to give him a total of 17 OC with the 2 Triacle Menhirs, all 3 models on the objective, which I think is kind of funny. And there's also another unit to mention within this detachment, which is the Triarch Stalker. Another Triarch unit, of course, so could use the -1 to damage stratagem if you wanted to. It's a pretty solid all-rounder. It's got the speed, it's got options for weapons pre-game in your lists. I like the Heat Ray, which has 2 profiles, the Melter option or the Torrent option. So you can kind of be a bit flexible within game. It's pretty quick, it's semi-durable for a light vehicle. It can fight in melee as well with its 4 attacks at a 3 damage piece. And make sure to fire with it first because it does ignore cover for other units that are firing at that enemy unit. So that's the Obeisance Phalanx. Let's move on to the Hypercrypt Legion. This is the bouncy detachment, lots of fun with this one. End of your opponent's turn, units that are not within engagement range could come off the battlefield, and at strike force level, which is 2,000 points, you can do this to 2 units. And then you put them in strategic reserves. You don't have to bring them back in next turn, you just put them in reserves. They've been classed as hyper-phased. So this is going to revolve around ultra quick movement, around the board. Everything can hyperphase, and you can hyperphase an additional unit using the Dimensional Overseer enhancement too. So if you added that enhancement, it will be 3 units at 2k. However, there are gems in this detachment that do the hyperphasing better than others. I'll start with the Deep Strikers. You've got Hexmark Destroyers, you've got Death March, you've got Triumph Praetorians, you've got Ophidian Destroyers and the Transcendent Catan. They're the ones in particular that are going to be super useful. Because they've got Deep Strike, they can re-enter the battlefield using the Deep Strike ability, so they don't have to use the table edges, which is very useful for objective scoring in particular, or just board control if you want to get onto certain areas, key locations of the battlefield. What's really useful though is when you pull them off, they're not returning to the battlefield until your movement phase or end of your movement phase, the reinforcement step of your movement phase to be exact. By that stage you've already seen your secondary cards. If you've got some brand new cards from your command phase, you now know exactly what you need to do. Maybe you've just got behind enemy lines, maybe you've just got overwhelming firepower, force, or storm hostile, one of those. You know what you've got to do now. And you've got units in reserve that got deep strike that can now go in and do whatever you need them to do. It's very useful having that in that particular order. If you wanted to get a unit in a little bit closer because of the 9-inch restriction, you can with Cosmic Precision. That's a 6-inch range, so away from enemy units. You can't charge after doing so, but sometimes it's useful just to throw in maybe a shooter unit, a ranged unit, or just to throw in something cheap like a single Locust Destroyer to score something like Established Locust or something like that. It works, it's very useful. We've got the Deep Strike enhancement if you want to add Deep Strike to a unit, which is the Austrioclave Fulcrum. So if you wanted to give some Locust Destroyers Deep Strike, or some Immortals Deep Strike, or some Scorbet Destroyers Deep Strike, you can do so. Just add it to the leader, and bosh, there you go. Another big unit within this detachment is the Monolith, the Necron's Monolith. Now most of the stratagems within this detachment will relate to the Monolith in some shape or form. Hyperphasic recall, so if you lose a single infantry model anywhere on the battlefield, you can teleport to the Monolith. So you've got to stay within 3 inches of the Monolith, so they could be on the other side of the battlefield. Bang, use a stratagem, and all of a sudden all your warriors have moved to a different location. That's useful for moving OC around. Quantum Deflection for a 4+ invulnerable save on a Monolith for a phase, very useful. Dimensional Corridor to be able to charge out the Monolith when you're using the Eternity Gate, which is its natural ability. So you can naturally teleport these things around anyway, but you can't normally charge out. With this stratagem you can. And then you've got Entropic Damping to make weapons that are firing at the Monolith hazardous. Any ones, kill them. Nice. There's some good enhancements within this attachment, such as a Rising Tyrant, which I think is very useful on a Plasmancer in particular, when he's leading Immortals, or it could be a Locust Lord leading the Locust Destroyers, because you get full rerolls on entry. And of course you're going to be doing a lot of entry because of the hyperphasing ability. So if you bring them in, you're re-rolling all the hit rolls, you're going to be fishing for your lethal hits, your criticals on a 5+ as well. Just fish, even if it's 3, roll it again, go for the 5. Now the one drawback I'd say with the Hypercrypt Legion is kind of staying on objectives. I find that the hardest part. Only teleport things you need to teleport off, or hyperphase rather. Only hyperphase things off that you need to hyperphase. Because if you're doing it at the end of your opponent's turn, that means they're off the battle, off the board for your command phase, which is where you're scoring your primary points, your VP in the command phase. So you've got to be a little bit careful of that. You can't just be hyperphasing willy-nilly, because you're going to be losing points if you do so. Then we come on to our newest detachment, which is the Star Shatter Arsenal. Everyone's favourite at the moment. So you've got the Relentless Onslaught. So when any Necron units attack a model that's on an objective, whether it's at range or in melee, they're going to get a +1 to the hit roll. In addition, vehicles and mounted units, but not Titanic, make that very clear. So vehicles and mounted units, again, are going to gain the Assault ability, which means you're going to be able to move, you can advance up to D6, and then you're going to still be able to fire. You won't be able to charge though, so don't let that one catch you out, because that sometimes has caught me out. You can't charge. But that's going to be a lot of movement there. Going to be very useful for a lot of units, but not Titanic. Don't make that mistake. So this is of course built around vehicles, it's built around mounted units. We've got quite a lot of those. It's going to make our detachment quite speedy, quite quick. And vehicles and mounted units are already quite speedy and quite quick. I think you're going to auto select one of two units here. The first one is, well, the first toss up is whether it's the Silent King or whether it's the Command Barge. You're likely going to go for one, sometimes you go for both, but I tend to go for one or the other. The Silent King alongside 2 Doomsday Arcs is probably ideal. Everything's now got Assault because nothing's Titanic. You're re-rolling hit rolls and wound rolls of a 1 from the Silent King's ability. That's really good with those Doomsday Arcs because 1s are a pain in the bum when you roll those. You could use Tank Shot with the Silent King as well. That's of course if you didn't advance with him. Alternatively, you take that Command Barge and you take 3 Doomsday Arcs. That's the play, and you add the enhancement Dread Majesty. Basically gives the same ability that the Silent King provides, rerolls hit rolls over 1, reroll wound rolls over 1 for anything within 6. So again, this is going to now apply to 3 Doomsday Arcs that are within 6 inches of your Command Barge. And that's going to cost 150 points, that Command Barge, whereas the Silent King costs 420 points. But you've got the 2 Tricle Minions there that are damage 6 weapons each. The Silent King also has a lot of weapons himself, and a few extra perks and bonuses with his own abilities. But if you do the Command Barge as well as the 3 Doomsday Arcs, I believe you're saving about 70 points. And that's the one I tend to go for, but I do mix it up. Now whether you've got 2 Arcs or 3 Doomsday Arcs, you're going to be quite tight on space because these vehicles are quite large. Well, they're quite long in fact, especially with these current terrain rules. So there is a stratagem that is useful here, which is the Dimensional Tunnel stratagem. So you can go through ruins. And if you're still not going to make it, you could also use the Chrono Shift stratagem, which is an auto advance of 6 inches. Don't forget you could also pivot to get your Doomsday Arc, well, the rear end of the Doomsday Arc out of the ruin. Because of course you can't land in the ruin or on the walls of a ruin. Now other vehicles that are going to work particularly well are Triax Stalkers with Assault, Canoptek Spiders, their vehicles with Assault, Annihilation Barges. I mean, they're not great, but they're quite cheap. They can double up as an action monkey at a push. Now after that you're going to be looking at the mounted units. We've got a few mounted units here. Locust Destroyers, ideally led by a Lord. Hopefully you're going to be targeting the nearest unit, so you're going to gain the rerolls of hit rolls. If they're on objectives, that'd be full rerolls. But with Assault, you're more likely to do that because you're going to get closer to that unit and then fire. Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Exterminator weapons, again led by a Lord. Very useful. Again, firing on objectives can get a +1 to the hit roll. Criticals on a 5+ with the sustain hits 1. Nice. Locust Heavy Destroyers with the Gorse Disruptors. Now, if you do advance them, of course you're going to, well, if you move them, let alone advance them, you're going to lose your heavy ability. So, you know, it's a little bit of an iffy one. It depends on if you've got no line of sight. You may as well advance as well. Otherwise, you're not making any rolls whatsoever. So you may as well at least hit on a 3. It could still be a 2 if you're firing on objectives because of the detachment rule. Then there's Tomb Blades. I mean, they're already rapid. They can even move after shooting as well. Ultra rapid unit. I use them for scoring in particular, but they do have a bit of offense if needed. Now, all these shooty options, having Assault gives you a lot of mobility. And like I said, those Tomb Blades having Assault. I mean, they had Assault with the Tesla option anyway, with the Twin Tesla carbines, but now you can take the particle beamers, or you can take the Gorse option and still have assault. We should mention some extra enhancements here. One for the Locust Lord in particular, which is Demanding Leader, which allows a unit within 6 inches to fall back and shoot. I found quite a few times that my Locust Destroyers get caught out, and once they're being tagged, they're not great in melee, and you've got to fall back anyway just to get them to do something, but you've lost shooting for a turn and there's only 5 turns. So having the fall back and shoot ability with an enhancement is very useful for Locust Destroyers or the Locust Heavies with Exterminators, whatever you've gone for. From Impedance Fields, a unit within 6 has a -1 to damage. Again, the Locust Destroyers or Locust Heavies, -1 to damage them is very useful. I really like that one, especially when your Locust Lord carries a Resurrection Orb as well. There's a bit of durability in there, even though they don't have an in-1 save. Now there is one more unit I wanted to point out in the Star Shatter arsenal, which is Imhotep the Stormlord. I started this video with Imhotep, I'm going to end this video with Imhotep. The stratagems in this detachment are quite pricey, a lot of them cost you 2 command points. So having a CP farm is vital. I think you need him in this list, you need him in this detachment, because a lot of these 2 CP stratagems can really swing in your favour if you've got the command points to use them. But if you've been spending them willy-nilly on other things, you're only going to get 1 for your turn, and then you're going to realise, damn, I'm 1 short. So having Imhotep is very useful in the Star Shatter arsenal. So guys, that's my Necron detachment strategies. Let me know yours down in the comments down below. Make sure you're subscribing, and I'll see you next time.